Welcome to Bridget to Wellness. My name is Bridget, your host, and today I have a very special guest, Fernando Flores. Welcome, Fernando.
Thank you, Bridget.
Thank you so much for being here. Now tell us, first of all, tell us about yourself and where you came from.
Definitely, and first of all, thank you for having me on your show. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And to be able to talk a little bit about myself and what I'm doing now. So my background is, I actually was born in Evanston, Illinois, and I lived there for probably 9-10 months. So I was a baby before I went to live in Mexico. And I grew up in Mexico till I was 8 years old. And I grew up with my mother and my grandmother, while my father worked in the United States, and where he provided for us. And when I was 8 years old, that's when we reunited and immigrated to the Los Angeles area, where I eventually grew up. And that's right.
What is your father's name?
Javier.
Javier. Yes. Much gratitude to your father.
Thank you. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And when we reunited and I was 8 years old, it was definitely a big change for me. It was a whole new world. I didn't understand the language. I definitely felt like an outsider. And being from an immigrant family, growing up low income, because my mother worked cleaning houses and she was an immigrant. And as an immigrant, she felt a lot of fear around what if we were separated, right? And from my father's end, he worked in doing restaurant work. And so growing up in a family where we, in many occasions, were living paycheck to paycheck, right? Definitely was something that was my lived experience and something that eventually motivated me to do the work that I've done for the past 10 years as an attorney. And part of my journey in growing up in the United States was feeling like an outsider, as coming from an immigrant family. And I remember my mother and my father facing different employment-related issues, right? Problems around, being made fun of because of how they spoke English or not being able to speak English, and sometimes not getting paid adequately, right? So I remember all those things taking place in my family, and I knew that it wasn't right what they experienced.
At a very young age.
At a very young age. I knew, because I could sense it, I could see it, that it wasn't right, especially how they were experiencing it. I saw that it didn't feel good for them, right, to be mistreated, right, as workers. And at that young age, I didn't know what to do about it. I had no sense of, how do you enforce your rights, right? But it stuck with me, and I knew that it wasn't right, and I knew that I wanted to do something about it. I just didn't know what. So fast forward a few years, and when I was 12 years old, had been in the US now for about 4 years, I was actually in a car accident. But I wasn't in a car. I was actually hit by a car.
Oh, Fernando.
Yeah, and that was really intense on many different levels, because I was struck by a car going reverse when they thought, they had put drive, they actually put reverse, and they hit the pedal to the metal. They hit 7 other people and myself, but I took a really big hit where the back part of the car hit my leg and it broke my femur in half. And that was something that really impacted my sense of mobility at a young age. Because even to this day, I remember that period in my life when I had to be in the hospital for 26 days, because what the doctors did, they didn't want to leave any metals or screws in my knee. I was 12 years old.
Right.
You know,
At such a young age.
Exactly.
You're still growing. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And I think mainly because of that, because they knew that I was 12, that I still had, you know, a lot of a growth spurt to go through. They didn't want me to have any sort of impediments in there.
Yeah.
So what they did was, through my knee, they put a screw, right, that eventually was tied to a pulley, where my femur basically, over the period of 26 days, because after it broke, it dropped to the side. Like one part, the top part of the bone fell to the bottom part of the bone. And so they had to realign it. And that took time.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And so over time with the pulley, once the bone realigned in that 26-day period, then for the first time in those 26 days, because I was, you know, in bed the whole time. You know,
and it still dropped. It still shifted?
After the 26 days, when it realigned, what they did was they put me in a cast from the top part of my belly, the lower part of my chest, like right in the middle of my torso, all the way down to my ankle. No. Yeah. So it wasn't like I was done with those 26 days at the hospital and it was over, right? Now I was still laying down, but it was with my legs stretched out and a full, almost like body cast. Yeah.
Did you have a lot of itches?
I did, especially because this was June 12th of 94 when the accident happened. So 26 days in, I spent my birthday in the hospital. And
that's rough for a child.
That was rough, you know, and you know, even then I still remember trying to keep a smile on my face.
Yeah.
But the hardest part, Bridget, I think, was when we would have visitors and sometimes they would kick the pulley, which would then shift my leg while I was laying in bed, and that caused a lot of pain.
Oh.
That was definitely painful. I think the rest I was able to manage. And the 7-week period, when I was laying down, it was all in the summer in Southern California. So it was hot and itches were common. Yeah. But yeah, you know, and I thought that was the hard part. But the hard part was actually once I had the cast taken off and then I had to go to therapy, that was really tough. Basically, almost learning how to walk again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe getting past the fear.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, actually, Bridget, like, that experience caused a lot of fear in my family because there was fear of whether I was gonna recuperate fully again. There was fear around how are we gonna pay for, you know, the emergency medical bills, right? How are we gonna take care of a lot of these things, right? And this is the period when we were down, right? We were down emotionally, we were down spiritually, we were down physically, right? When we were able to get the help of an attorney to represent us in a case that related to my injury, right? And that attorney being able to help us out was something that inspired me because I saw the power that this attorney had to represent someone when they were down. Down but not out, right? And I wanted that. I wanted to be able to do that for others. And that was a big part of why I was inspired to follow that path because I wanted to be able to do that for people who were, maybe I wasn't going to be able to do it for my family, right? But people who were in similar circumstances as my family, I knew that, you know, if I had that power, I'd be able to help them out. So
that's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to cry.
Yeah.
You really made it. I don't want to fast forward too much because I want to hear about your story.
Yeah, yeah.
So now you're out of your cast.
Yeah. So when I finally came out of my cast, right, that's when I feel the real journey with pain started. Because when I was, in bed in the hospital, when I was in my cast and just laying down, I was very stagnant. There was a lot of stasis. I wasn't moving very much, right? But the therapy part was the opposite. I had to be moving. I had to, get my muscles back up. My leg had atrophied a lot. It had, lost a lot of muscle, and I had to strengthen it back up. And that was definitely a big challenge, especially as a 13-year-old, trying to fit in. I was just trying to fit in, but
so now you're 13.
Yeah, now I'm 13.
Yeah.
And I'm going to a new school now, so that was a lot of change as well. I started a new school. I was trying to get better, and as a teenager, just trying to fit in. But I had a big limp, and I had a crutches, that I used, and I really tried to work hard to get back up to my old physical state, and that in and of itself was also a journey, because it took a while. And I wanted it to happen sooner than the period of time that it was taking, But I just tapped into a lot of courage, as much courage as I could muster in every therapy session.
Yeah. Yes.
And thank goodness it worked out. No screws, no metals, and I definitely see it as a blessing and a curse. It was tough to go through that, very tough. But at the same time, every once in a while I'll feel pain in my knee, but it's only if I'm inactive. If I don't maintain and stay active. Yeah, so as long as I'm active and doing exercise and running and doing activity and hiking and doing this, I don't feel any pain.
Way to go.
So it's kind of like a reminder, hey, if as an attorney, if I'm really busy and I'm not exercising, I'll start feeling, that pain, and in an indirect way, it kind of takes care of me.
And what is that quote? Motion is lotion.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
And I'm just really glad that it turned out, well, and that I was able to get back up to the level of physical well-being, that I was before. So, yeah.
Pretty incredible.
Yeah.
And moving forward, how about your family now?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm married to my wife, Elizabeth, and we've been married for 8 years now, and we knew each other 3 years before that. And she is definitely a rock in my life, and she's a huge, huge supporter of the work that I do, the work that I've been doing. And it's been an awesome journey to go through with her, and grow with her, and just learn to nurture and foster love with someone. It's been, it's been an awesome journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my parents, they live in the LA area, and have a sister, a younger sister, who is, she lives in Washington, Vancouver.
Okay.
Yeah.
And was she born here?
And she was, yeah. She was born in Southern California.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any children?
No children yet.
Okay. And now your practice as an attorney, that was a journey in itself. Yeah.
Yeah. So as an attorney, the work that I did was focused predominantly on representing workers who were not adequately paid, or who were discriminated against, or who were sexually harassed, or harassed for some other reason. I would represent them in cases in state and federal court. I was actually able to represent workers who faced very, very difficult circumstances in their own lives, and you know, it varied. It varied. I actually handled cases of human trafficking victims, and then also guest workers who come in for a certain period of time to the United States to work in, for example, setting up carnival rides. And we don't really think about that. You know, there's a lot of fairs that get set up in the summer and in the fall period and in the spring period as well. But the workers that do that, the majority are guest workers because the shifts are anywhere from, you know, 16 to 20-hour shifts. You know, they set up rides between 4 in the morning till 9 in the morning. They operate the rides throughout the day during the fair hours. And then in the evening, once it's over at around 10, they have to dismantle everything. They'll finish like at 1 in the morning, and then they'll drive to the next location. And they'll sleep in the back of these big rigs where they have beds there for them. And then they get to the next location, 5, 6 in the morning, and they start the process all over again. And they'll do this for months at a time. And I represented workers that, you know, who did that work and were paid much less than the minimum wage, right? And so that was one of the cases that I still remember, and also workers in a lot of different industries, you know, that did domestic work, restaurant work, you know, similar work to what my parents had done when they first, you know, came to the United States themselves. And I really advocated for them fiercely, you know, for all the clients that I had, because I just had that fire in my belly, you know, and I did it for 10 years, and yeah.
You were the voice.
Yeah, and I think that hits the nail on the head, because a lot of these workers, they themselves being immigrants, a lot of times they just want to be heard. They want to be seen, just like anybody else, right? At the end of the day, that's what we want. And for many years, they were not seen. Nobody saw them. Nobody saw the injustices that they were facing. And so as an advocate for them, you know, and there's a lot of advocates that do this work, right? But I myself try to make sure that their story was heard. If they were up for the challenge, and many of them were, right? I wanted to make sure that their story was heard, you know, whether it was because a lot of times the opposing party didn't want to hear anything, you know, from my clients. They were like, no, that's not true, and we would get into these big arguments. But at the end of the day, a lot of them just wanted to be heard. They wanted their story to be put out there, and many times they didn't care if they won or lost. They cared about being heard.
Being heard.
Yeah, being seen. Yeah. So that was definitely a powerful, you know, area to get into. Yeah.
Did they seek you?
So, yes. They typically sought the organizations that I worked for, right? Or the law firms that I worked for, or the state agencies that I worked for. Because I've worked in the nonprofit sector. I worked for a brief period in the private sector, and also for the state government. So a lot of times when a worker is in that situation where they themselves don't have an understanding of how the legal system works, they're not going to go straight to the courthouse and file a lawsuit, because they don't have the know-how of how to initiate that process. And it's, you know, it can be simple if, for example, it's a small claims case. But it can be very complex if you need to file a complaint, a formal complaint, serve it on the other side, and do it through state and federal court, right? That gets more complicated. So they would reach out to some of the nonprofits that I worked at in Los Angeles, here in the Bay Area, and then when I worked for the labor commissioner, the state labor commissioner who handles enforcement of the labor code, they would go to the labor commissioner's office. So a lot of workers end up going to the labor commissioner's office because they know that that's a state agency that enforces those rights. And that's one of the main reasons why I worked there, and I really enjoyed my time working there, because the mission meshed really well with my passion, right?
Yeah, I see that as well.
Yeah.
let's move on to what you're doing now.
Yeah.
And would you call yourself a performance coach?
Yes, actually, that's what I call myself. I call myself a high performance coach.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what I try to do now. Actually, not what I try. What I do now is I work with attorneys to ensure that they're taking care of themselves holistically, that they're not disregarding any dimension of their well-being, which in turn, by making sure that they're taking care of themselves holistically, allows them to perform at higher levels. And that, to me, was the key to really perform at high levels, right? To really do awesome work and excel and succeed in a lot of my cases when I stop disregarding certain dimensions of my well-being.
Yeah.
Right? And so I try to make sure that we set up a plan so that they're not disregarding any dimensions, whether, you know, are you developing your, you know, your social well-being dimension well? Physically, are you exercising? Mm-hmm. Emotionally, are you taking care of yourself? Spiritually, right? What are you doing to make sure that every morning you wake up and you feed your heart, mind, spirit, energy, some positivity before you start your day? Yeah. Right? A lot of times we get the first thing we do is we get our phone and we start checking news, and you know, that's really all negative information that we're receiving. Why not start with something positive, right? And that's going to set you on a slightly different track that at the end of the day, it's going to look very different where you end up.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty incredible coming from somebody like you and what you've done and so many years of studying. Yeah. And for you to come back and make this huge transition. Definitely. It's pretty incredible.
Thank you, Bridget.
Yes, it really is. And so you're also coaching students as well.
Yes, actually, that's a component that my company is doing as well, because when I was in law school, that was a very stressful period. There's a lot of adjustment, especially coming from an immigrant background and being the first person in my family to become an attorney, you know, a first generation attorney. There's a lot of new ground that you have to get accustomed to. There's a lot of new ground that you have to understand and adapt to, right? And so there was, for me in that journey, again, a lot of fear that I experienced, but also a lot of courage that I had to tap into, right, to face those fears head on. And in your first year of law school, you're really focused on understanding what this environment is about. It's a lot of reading, you know, and the reading is not, you know, like a simple, you know, book or you know, something that you just read. It's fun reading. Like, it's intense cases, complex cases around codes, labor codes, and interpretation of those codes and all of that, right? So you're getting adjusted to this new language, this new system, and then you go through that your entire first year. Then your second year is you do that, right, which is not new anymore, but now you're having to balance all of that work with all the other activities that you get involved with. So, you know, you end up doing what's called the law review, which is the journal of the particular law school. And you do a lot of editing of, you know, legal essays and legal notes that get published, right? Or you're part of different organizations, you know, student groups. And so you become a leader of those organizations. And so you're having to balance a lot your second year as well. And for me, actually, it was in my second year where there was a period of time where I experienced depression because I was just so busy. And you know, there was like a 2-week period where I was working, you know, 14, 15, 16 hours a day, and I was not seeing the light of day. It was during like the winter period, you know, and I was really just really going through a tough time. where I was not taking care of myself, right? And so to be able to come out of that, it was really, really important. And I'm glad that I did, that it didn't last, longer than several weeks for me, right? Because I know, especially now doing the work that I do, it can last a lot longer and it can be a lot worse, right? So, and I try to talk about that experience so that folks know that everybody is going through something. Everybody's going through something. Yeah. That, if you're experiencing something that, is either anxiety or stress or depression or akin to that, you're not alone, right? And even the people that are out there that look really confident and that seem to have it all together, we're all going through something.
Yes.
So, yeah.
It takes a team, it really does. And that's why I feel it's very important to create like-minded people, and the same association, just so you can move fast, so you can grow and support each other.
Yeah. And I think that's what I'm doing with I Matter Now. Just creating this space where attorneys, advocates, law students, and anyone else in a profession that is fast-paced, high stress, is able to gain some skills so that they can process some of these sentiments, some of these very challenging sentiments that we're all going through in some form or another, right? And just to get back to your question, in my third year of law school, the challenge that comes up is you have to take the California bar exam, right? I had to take the bar exam. So at the time when I took it, I didn't pass the first time. And now it's a 2-day exam, but back then it was a 3-day exam. So I took it again, so that's a total of 6 full days of examination. And there's a lot of preparation that goes into it. And in failing the exam the first time, I learned a lot of strategies that didn't work, and I learned a lot of strategies that do work. And so that's what I'm ultimately now helping law students with, and making sure that they know these strategies so that if they implement them and adopt them early on, they don't necessarily have to take the exam again, right? So, yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Just to be able to have all the tools necessary. Once we have all those tools, we can pretty much open up that imaginary toolbox.
Yeah.
And say, what tool do I have for this situation?
Yeah. And one of the things that I try to bring awareness to is we always have 2 options when we face a big challenge. Option 1 is we can do it in a stressed, frustrated, maybe fearful way. Option 2 is we can do it in a centered, focused, and grounded way, right? And the difference between the 2 is really mindset. And being able to see the situation not as a threat, but as an opportunity for growth. Not as something that's gonna bring you pain if you don't quote unquote succeed at it. Misery, right? But something that's gonna bring you a new level of growth and a new level of success, just in attempting to do it.
We're going to take a quick break.
Okay.
And we'll be right back after these messages.
See on page 4 that the projections need to be earthquake next Thursday.
Seriously? Thursday? Can't do that.
This is really inconvenient.
I have yoga that day. I have no time for this. So.
I can't do Thursday, but I can do Friday.
Disasters don't plan ahead. You can. Talk to your loved ones about how you're going to be ready in an emergency. Don't wait. Communicate.
And welcome back to Bridge to Wellness. And here we have Fernando Flores. We were talking about what you're doing now. And please tell me the title of your business now.
Definitely. It's called I Matter Now.
I Matter Now.
With one T.
With one T. Why is that?
Well, I decided to, when I first got the idea, in law school, we have this system that we call IRAC, which is Issue, Rule, Analysis, Conclusion, right? And it's the format that we use to write every essay. And when you take the bar exam, that's also the format, the analytical format that you use to write the essays as well and write the performance tests. Those are the different parts of the bar exam. And so I did the same thing for I Matter, I-M-A-T-E-R. And it's what I Matter provides, you know, different forms, different skills around like incantation, motivational quotes, affirmations, tips, exercises, resources.
Oh, interesting. You put a lot of thought into that.
I did.
Yeah,
and so
it's far more than just saying, I matter now.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, and it's also a recognition of you acknowledging that you matter, right? Because in our busy day, in our busy lives, in our busy world, we often don't make time to recognize, one, we know that we matter, right? But how do we matter is also another really important question. And more importantly, how do we want to matter, right? And so I think those are the questions that I try to bring up to others so that they can really sit with that and figure out what impact do I want to have? What value to others do I want to bring? Those are the questions that I've asked myself consistently. And that's a little bit about where the name I Matter Now comes from. And the now is recognizing that you matter not tomorrow, not next week, but now.
Yeah, right now. Yeah. And this second has just passed.
Right.
We just wasted a moment.
Yes.
And you did mention your godson. Does he have anything to do with?
Well, yeah, I mean, my godson he's a really big part of my life now. Just to give you a little bit of context, in 2015, my mother's oldest brother, she comes from a family of 11, and her oldest brother passed away. Yeah. Right? And it was really tough on our family. You know, the oldest out of 11 siblings, my uncle.
Icon.
Yeah. You know, passing as a result of heart disease, right? And in 2016, my godson's father also passed away from heart disease. And it was in this period, in 2016, where I committed to myself to make sure that I took care of myself, because I had this on-off relationship with exercise, like I was mentioning, right? Where I would get busy with trial work and I would just stop doing exercise, and then I would get back to it, and then I would stop, and then I would get back to it. But what I decided to do, you know, as a result of my own...
We can do planks right now.
Yeah, that's right. Little jumping jacks.
Yes.
Yeah. But as a result of, you know, their passing, and my friend who passed away in 2016 was my godson's father. He asked us a month before he passed to be my godson's godparents. You know, he asked my wife and I, and a month later he was gone. And that was really, really tough as well. Really, really challenging on all of us. And, you know, even to this day, there's definitely days where it's, you know, it's tough. But he lived his life with just a big smile and a big open heart. And it was a big impetus for me to, one, take care of myself, but also start thinking about what kind of impact do I want to have on others' lives? What kind of message do I want to give to others, and what skills am I not tapping into that I could tap into and really impact people's lives with? And so those experiences for me were a huge impetus to have a reshifting of that taking care of myself, right? One. And as I continued to stay committed to exercising consistently, then I started doing other things. And it was kind of this snowball effect, right? Where I was exercising, and then I started meditating consistently. I started journaling consistently. And so I was reflecting, and I was also reading a lot more, and I was learning and growing, and I was reintegrating everything that I was learning, and I was just really becoming this person who was reintegrating a lot of that information that dealt with holistic well-being. And once I made the decision to put myself first, and a lot of times it sounds selfish, right? Especially if we're parents, if we, if we have our parents, it's like, well, what do you mean? Don't you want? Or if we were married, don't you put your spouse first or your kids first, right? And I push back on that sometimes, because if you don't take care of yourself, if you don't fully love yourself, then you're not going to put out that relationship that you're asking of your children, or that you're asking of your loved ones, right? So the more self-love that you can foster, the more self-care that you can foster, the better you're going to be able to do that for others.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so, yeah.
Oh, I agree. I agree.
I have a hunch that you do, Bridget.
When we take care of ourselves, we then can open up the floodgates and say, bring it on. Bring it on. Because I've taken care of myself. I got it. I feel good. Now I can handle the world. I can tackle the world.
Yeah.
Until it's time to rest again.
Yeah.
And so it's just this cycle, but we must take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
And I fully understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From my experience, I had many years, even as an attorney, where I disregarded, for example, my emotional well-being, right? Growing up, and through no fault of anyone, this was just my experience, I didn't learn how to manage or process emotions. We don't get taught that, and we don't get taught that in middle school or high school or university or law school. That's not a skill that we get taught. Emotional well-being, emotional awareness, emotional growth, and responsibility. Those are not things that we get taught. I didn't get taught that for a really long time, and I had a much more limited scope, a much more limited spectrum of the emotion processing that I was able to do. And so once I realized that a few years back, I decided to tackle it head on. And it was like unlocking this key where I was just able to see everything like in a very different way. Because,
I hear it in your voice too. I listened to your podcast.
Yes.
And I thought, my goodness, you're speaking from your diaphragm, and I felt so much energy when you were speaking.
Yeah.
It was so great. And when you speak with energy, you can be easily heard.
Yeah, that's true. I love that.
I'm working on that myself. A soft-spoken voice of mine.
It's
no,
great.
Honestly, I really appreciated your podcast, and it was great. I really encourage people to listen, tune in.
Thank you, Bridget. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And it's you know, for folks that don't know, it's called the Trainee Heart. And the reason why I called that one a Trainee Heart, I mean, I also thought about that one extensively, what to call it. And it's also somewhat of contradictory, the naming of it. It's like, what? Attorneys have hearts? It's like, what? You know, attorneys feel? It's like, yeah. You know, whether we acknowledge that, you know, because it's a profession where we don't show vulnerability, where we are not supposed to, if our client is crying and going through a difficult situation, if we start crying ourselves, right, we're seen as weak. We're seen as not being able to hold it together. And then this applies not just in the workplace, but when we go to the courthouse, when we're preparing. And think about it, if we do that for hours and hours and hours throughout the day, I mean, what do we do to shut it off and then be emotionally available with our loved ones, right? Do we have, I mean, I didn't have that for years. I didn't make that transition. And so if you're emotionally unavailable for most of your day, it's very likely that you're going to be emotionally unavailable when you go home, right? And that's when tension can come up. That's when arguments can rise, right? Instead of being able to manage what you're feeling and tell yourself, you know what, I had a stressful day today. I think what's coming up for me right now is as a result of that. It's not anything to do with this interaction that I'm having with my loved one, you know? And so...
Very good.
Yeah, yeah. I'm passionate about that. And yeah.
That's good for anyone to hear.
Yeah, it is. I mean, if I actually just recently did a presentation, and one of the attendees was telling me that their 6-year-old is now being taught emotional intelligence in her elementary school, which I was just jumping for joy inside. I mean, I wasn't jumping in the presentation, but I was just like, that is awesome. Because a lot of times, and I experienced it myself, you know, we end up having really intense conversations as attorneys, right? And sometimes you go into work and, you know, you dread checking your emails because of the negative energy and that you're going to be receiving from the other side. And sometimes we don't even know that you're actually receiving negative energy. But if you're not aware of it, what happens is you're just on the receiving end of all of this constantly, hour after hour, day in and day out, week after week, month after month, year after year, right? And if you don't have a channel, eventually all those thoughts, right, are gonna make you feel a certain way, and you're gonna have certain attitudes, right? And this applies to anyone. You're right, right? If
or become, excuse me, completely callous.
Exactly. You just shut off. And that's sometimes, for some folks, that can lead to burning out, what we refer to as burning out, because it gets exhausting. It gets tiring, having to hold it up and not feel. I mean, we process, you know, dozens and dozens and dozens of emotions throughout the day, whether we realize it or not. We're constantly feeling something, right? If we're awake, we're feeling. And having that awareness, you know, is really important, because you can then start making choices like, well, I'm feeling upset right now, but I'm gonna let that pass through me because I don't want to continue feeling upset, you know? And also waking up in the morning and letting go of what happened yesterday. Can't do anything about it. Can't change it, right? But you can change your attitude about how you move forward. That you have control over. And more importantly, it's your responsibility, right?
Right, right. I can feel that, I'm sensing that having this nice balance can also draw more clients into the practice as well.
Yes.
Positive energy. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's one of the main things also that I bring up to my coaching clients, that if you are able to take care of yourself holistically, And in particular, raise your level of emotional awareness. You're going to treat your employees a lot better, right? You're going to bring in clients who will stay with you for a much longer time because people will remember how you make them feel.
When it's genuine.
When it's genuine
Yes.
and authentic. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's a really important point, right? It's not just putting on a show and trying to attract them with you know, a fake sense of trying to lure them in, right? No.
Yeah.
When you genuinely take care of yourself and you genuinely just show your energy to others, and people will be attracted to that, you know? That's actually one of the quotes that inspired me to make this move.
What's that?
It was from Jim Rohn, and your level of success will seldom exceed your level of personal development, because success is something you attract by the person you become. And so that's when I was like, I was really focused on success, not so much on who I was as a person. But then I really started focusing on, okay, who am I as a person? I had to just start there a few years ago. You know, I was like, who am I? You know, I had leaned on this professional identity that I had built for myself for so long that in many ways, I didn't know some aspects of myself.
So in some ways you were stuck.
In some ways, I was stuck. In some aspects of my well-being, I was. Yeah. And so in going to those places to get myself unstuck, I learned a lot about myself and I learned a lot of strategies. And so, yeah, in a way, I like that, Bridget. I help people get unstuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do I say sometimes? What do I say? Unstick the stuck. I need to unstick the stuck.
That's right.
It's very tiring, I feel, to live a very pretentious world. To be very pretentious, it hurts. And we sort of live in misery. And we do become stuck.
Yeah.
It's a very nice feeling when we can even work genuine.
Yeah, it's true. It's lighter.
And that's where faith comes in. We don't have to worry about receiving so many clients because faith handles that. Abundance is abound.
Yeah.
Faith, we take care of ourselves. Mind, body, soul, spirit. When we balance ourselves out like that, and we've got it, abundance.
Yeah.
Yeah, and things start pouring in.
Yeah, it's true.
Now, don't quote me on that, but it certainly does feel good.
Yeah.
When we put that ourselves in that process.
I think I'm gonna quote you on that every day. Because I completely agree, Bridget. You know, I had a scarcity mindset where even though I had everything that I needed, you still feel like you don't have enough, or you yourself are not enough, right? And so once I started doing my gratefulness meditation, for example, consistently every single day, I just realized I have everything that I need. I'm the person that I had been waiting for.
Yes.
We all are.
Yes.
But some of us, we just don't realize it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so we go about our days trying to find fulfillment in the external, when you can do it just by increasing that self-acceptance and self-love, and really find one of the hardest things that we have in developing in our lives, which is joy, right? And when you find that component of yourself, it's life-changing. I'm so grateful for it, you know, that I'm able to help my fellow colleagues, you know, and and future advocates that are going to make real changes in this world, make sure that they're taking care of themselves, you know, helping those who are helping others. I love doing that.
Yes.
I love it. I mean, I don't work anymore. I just serve.
I get it.
I stopped working. I don't. Every day I serve. That's what I do. You know? And yeah.
As long as we're getting enough sleep.
Yeah, that's right.
I keep relearning that over and over and over again.
Yeah, and drinking enough water, getting enough sleep,
yes.
You know.
Dr. Sophie, yes, water.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have to make sure that we walk the talk as well, right? And I try to keep that in mind as well, because entrepreneurship it's a different game for me. It's been a different game, and I've had to adopt new strategies, adapt to new environments as well. But because I've been doing it for almost all of my life, since I came to the United States.
Yes, you have.
It doesn't scare me. You know, and a lot of people I noticed would tell me, it's like, look, you know, you talking about your dreams is one thing, but you actually leaving the comfort of a very stable job to pursue them, that's very
huge.
different.
It's huge.
And yeah, I mean, I was like, I just believe in it so much. I believe in helping others this way, and so much that I just could not be held back. And it's not held back, it was more, I had to be unleashed, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I really encourage that. It's pushing yourself off that threshold.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're staying just right at the edge. We just kind of observe and look and take a few steps back sometimes, oftentimes, until somebody behind us, that's where you come in, to kind of push past the threshold. That's your job, correct?
Yeah.
Just a little nudge. They just need the tools and a little bit of nudge.
Yep. I feel...
Or 100.
Yeah.
Or 100 nudges.
100 nudges. Yeah. I mean, I really do see my job as providing guidance and helping you see where you should look. But ultimately, the decision to change is yours, because we don't resist change so much as we resist being changed. Does that make sense? So we don't like being changed by somebody else, and sometimes that's not genuine change. The change has to come from within.
Understand.
And so there are people who resist change, period. I have encountered that. But for the most part, what I've noticed is when you try to change someone and you should be this and you should be that, that doesn't work. But like, hey, look, this is what's worked for me. You can try it, see if it works for you. And it could be that it works. It could be that something slightly different will work for that particular person. So, yeah.
It's really great, and what you're doing. I think it's a huge transition. Huge transition. Would you ever go back?
I think that when I left my job, I wasn't tired of litigation. I still had that fire in me. It's just that I had a bigger fire brewing within of wanting to do this work. And I have not ruled it out in terms of going back and advocating for, vulnerable communities and doing that work. I have not ruled it out, because I really enjoyed it, and I learned how to do it well. And right now I'm focused on helping others learning how to do it well, and in a healthy way, in a way that allows them to be happier advocates, healthier advocates, right? But yeah, never know. I might end up going back to it. But for now, this is what I'm focused on.
Yeah. Do you have any workshops coming up?
I do, actually. Do you want me to provide dates and names? And all
Absolutely.
Okay,
anything
great.
that you have.
Yeah, so actually, I have a workshop on May 19th, and that's focused. That's focused on. It's called Emotional Wellness Mastermind, and the information's on my website, imatternow.com, and it is going to be providing information around, okay, how do you develop emotional wellness? How do you develop, emotional granularity? How do you become emotionally responsible? Awareness? How do you develop, how do you expose your emotions a little bit more? And how do you develop emotional temperedness? Right? I think those are all really important things that, and this mastermind is going to be focused a little bit more on how do you do that so that you can improve your professional and entrepreneurial skills. Because that's something that I did as an attorney, right? In developing those skills and applying them and seeing when my client was having a really tough time and me coming in to assuage those emotions so that they can perform really well in court.
I love it.
Because when they get really stressed out, that's when we have the blank out effect. And when we're really stressed out, our attention allocation shifts to keeping us safe versus trying to remember everything that you want to say in front of, all these people in the courtroom. So it's really important for attorneys to develop these skills, and not just in being able to manage yourself, but being able to manage your client, being able to manage opposing counsel, or being able to manage, the judge in the courtroom as well. So that's one workshop that I have coming up, and
Sounds like a very powerful workshop.
It is. I mean, we dig into real life situations, and we work through them in the workshop. And it's a 3-hour workshop in Berkeley, so it's here in the Bay Area. And then the other one that I haven't announced anywhere yet. So this is going to be the first show that I announce it in is the I Matter Now one-day conference scheduled for August 18th of this year. So it's going to be in San Francisco, and there's going to be more information coming on that one later this month.
I can't wait.
Yeah, but for now, if your viewers can save the date, that would be great. So August 18th, one day in San Francisco, and that one's just it's going to be great. It's going to focus on a lot of...
It's going to be great. You're going to have everyone doing jumping jacks and planks. Just kidding.
And the information is on the website. So it's imater.com. imaternow, imatternow.com.
Okay.
So.
That's your website and your workshops and then your podcast?
Yes. And so my podcast is Trainee Heart. And that one is on iTunes. You can also find, if you just search Trainee Heart on YouTube, the videos are there. And if you have any questions for me as well, my email is imatternow, again, imaternow @gmail.com. And I'm also on the social medias, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. And folks can reach out to me and follow me on those venues as well.
Perfect. I would definitely promote you. You have so much to offer.
Thank you,
so
Bridget.
much for the professional, for entrepreneurs, for anyone.
Yeah.
Anyone.
Yeah.
I thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed having you on my show, and I hope you come back again.
Thank you, Bridget. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.